I've been asked to make a few announcements before we get started, and all of you are probably aware that the program tonight and all of the UFO-related programs that we have in the city of Edinburg all go to benefit arts in the community and literacy. The library here and the fine arts community benefit greatly. And tonight they are selling merchandise up at the front, including t-shirts, both for the upcoming 2018 UFO Festival that we're having on April 13th and 14th, and for the UFO festivals from the past. There are some historic t-shirts available up front. So the current year's UFO Festival t-shirts are $20, and the past year t-shirts are $10. So you get those older, tried but true t-shirts for half price. Think of it that way. We also have conference tickets to the upcoming festival and conference, which, by the way, this year for the first time, the City of Edinburgh's UFO Festival has been ranked 3rd in the world in UFO festivals by Listbook. So we're very happy about that, and you have conference tickets available at a reduced price tonight. They're going to be, I believe, $35 at the door, but tonight you can pick them up for $25. That's to listen to 4 of the world's top UFO experts and speakers, including Travis Walton, whose amazing story of being captured and held aboard a UFO for a week was the basis of the Hollywood movie Fire in the Sky a few years back. And you're going to get to meet Travis and hobnob with him. He's one of the most likable individuals I have ever met on this planet. And Travis Walton will be here, will be our featured speaker on the 14th. We're also going to have some other outstanding speakers, including Nick Pope, who for 20 years worked for the Department of Intelligence of the United Kingdom, British Secret Service UFO Files Division. Nick Pope had the keys to the secret documents room at the UK. So you won't want to miss Nick Pope talking about his experiences and the files that he saw. Now that he's retired and living in the US, he can tell us what he saw. Also with us for the festival and conference on April 13th will be other excellent speakers that you won't want to miss, including John Greenwald, the keeper of the Black Vault, one of the world's most popular sites about UFOs, and he's been collecting UFO document releases from all over the world since he was 16 years old. So John Greenwald will be in Edinburg to talk about the documents and the files, the films and the photos that he has seen, and he'll share those with us. And of course, last but not least in my list of speakers, we're going to have Stephen Bassett, who is the world's only official lobbyist for UFO disclosure. He speaks before Congress. He has spoken before the United Nations. He has, through his efforts, thousands of documents about UFO incidents that the government had been keeping secret have been released over the past few years. So Stephen Bassett, I know Stephen is really into the government and what the various U.S. administrations have been doing in terms of disclosing UFO data. So he's going to talk about what happened under the Obama era, and he's going to talk a little bit about what's going on with the current president in terms of UFO disclosure. So all of this that I'm talking about have to do with the April 13th and 14th Edinburg UFO, I should back up, it's the 7th annual Edinburg UFO Conference and Festival. We're going to hold the Friday night event free to the public right out here in the courtyard that you all saw as you walked in. It's an outdoor festival with food booths and live music, and kids dress up in alien costumes and weird things like that. And it's just a fun evening for everybody. There's a laser light show. And that's going to be on Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th, Chris. I didn't even realize. Whoa. Friday the 13th, we're going to have a Friday the 13th UFO festival right out here in the courtyard, and it's free. And you're going to get to meet all the speakers who will speak the following day, but for whom you have to pay money to go hear speak, well, you get to see them for free on Friday night if you're not able to attend on Saturday.
It's a great time to get your photo taken with all these people.
Oh yeah, the authors have a great time meeting the folks here.
You see these folks on TV, and sometimes you kind of get the impression, oh, these are Hollywood folks. And most Hollywood folks are kind of unapproachable. But the folks you see at these UFO conferences, you can go up to them, you can talk to them, and get your picture taken with them. They're humans, just like the rest of us.
Well, I don't know about some of them, Chris, but they're mostly humans, yeah.
90%.
Some of them I'm still wondering. None of the ones we invited to speak, though. They're all humans. We're going to have a movie screening of Travis Walton's Fire in the Sky here at the Municipal Auditorium, right here where we are tonight. And it's going to be next Thursday, April 5th. Is next Thursday, April 5th? Anyone know?
Yes it is. Yes.
Next Thursday then. Travis Walton's story.
A whole week away. It's 2 weeks.
It's 2 weeks from now?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Thank you. It's 2 weeks from now. Thursday, April 5th, 6 p.m. here in the Municipal Auditorium, we're going to have the Travis Walton-inspired movie Fire in the Sky, which I have been in the forest with Travis where his encounter took place and from where he was taken. And it's an eerie sensation. I do know, because I've done a lot of conferences with Travis, I do know that he cannot bear to watch certain parts of the movie because they bring it all back to him psychologically, and he just has to leave the room, turn away, because it really, really disturbs him. So that's how good Fire in the Sky is. And if you haven't seen it, or if you want to see it, again, it's going to be Thursday, April 5th, which is not next Thursday. The following Thursday. Since we're the 23rd today, right? So it couldn't be next Thursday. Next Thursday would be like the 29th. Am I right, or am I right?
I have to look at my calendar just to know what today is.
Other announcements. Want to introduce myself just quickly. I've written 12 books about UFOs. I live here in Edinburg, and I came up a few years back with this harebrained idea, which I pitched to the fine folks at the Edinburg Public Library about having a conference, and it has grown over the years. We're in our 7th year, and we've had great fun with it. We've had tremendous guest speakers. We've had Stanton Friedman, many other great speakers that have come and spoken here in Edinburg. And Edinburg has become kind of a recognized destination, I won't say for UFOs, but for people who follow UFOs, let's put it that way. Although we have had some UFO sightings in the Edinburg area, which we're going to talk about tonight. I've been on a number of TV shows, including the UFO Hunters, and just this past June I had the privilege to be on the Travel Channel's Mysteries of the Outdoors. We did a TV show on mysteries of Big Bend National Park. Did anybody see that? Yeah, it's a very interesting place in West Texas, Big Bend, and there are mysterious events that happen there, including UFO-related stuff. We're going to show a trailer, just a brief trailer that was prepared by the library staff about one of the topics that we're going to talk about tonight is a mysterious incident that happened in Edinburg, north of town in 1966. And This trailer will give you just a quick overview, kind of a glimpse of what happened back in the 1966 time period. Here we go. Assisting us tonight, Mr. Chris James, who drove all the way from Laredo. Chris, thank you so much for coming and being with us. Say a few words about your background, if you will.
I appreciate y'all having this fantastic get-together. We tried something like this in Laredo 2011, 2012, but unfortunately it just didn't catch on. My name is Chris James. I live in Laredo with my wife. That's where I met her. And I drag her to all these bizarre get-togethers, and she puts up with it. I do a podcast called Strange Things with Chris James, and the good thing about it, it's free if you'd like to check it out. I also have written a few books. I only have two non-fiction books that deal with the Laredo Paranormal Research Society, and the second book is about the podcast that I do the first year. So if you're interested in things besides just UFOs, we talk about it on the show.
Okay, I don't know where the feedback's coming from, but we'll try to get that under control. So we're very happy to have Chris with us. One of the books that I wrote is called Fallen Angel. And unfortunately, it's kind of hard to get copies of it now. I don't have any with me tonight, but it talks about a UFO, an alleged UFO crash that happened near Laredo in the late 40s.
1947.
Right. So,
correction, 48.
So it came about that when I was studying the Roswell UFO crash, that I kept running into information about a crash near Laredo. And so I put out that little book, and I'm very happy that Chris has kind of taken the ball and run with it, because I published that book quite a long time ago. And he has continued to follow up on the story and bring it forward to people. So hopefully tonight we'll have a little chance to talk about that also.
I have a copy of Fallen Angel that's signed by the author that I might be willing to sell for good prices.
Collectible alert. We have a table where if you have an interesting story you'd like to share with the audience tonight, we have a table where you can register to come up and speak. Toward the end of the program, we'll call up folks based on the cards that are filled out. We have already received a number online, which we will be sharing with you. And if anybody would like to contribute your own story, we would love to hear that from you. You can have the unadulterated opinion of both Chris and myself on any matters that you're interested in hearing more information about. So once again, for those, some people just came in, so I'm going to rerun the trailer for our upcoming UFO conference and festival, which also features this interesting story of what happened in 1966. The fire department going out to another UFO crash site. Good timing on those sirens. So let's talk about what actually happened on that day back in 1966. It was around midnight, and it was north of Edinburg on Farm to Market Road 490. Now if you go north on 281 until you come to Farm or FM 490, you go about approximately 4 miles west of 281, and you'll be at the approximate location where this happened. And what happened then, and we have this based on the testimony of one of Edinburgh's leading citizens from the 60s and 70s, Mr. J.R. Milo Ponce, who was a deputy sheriff. He was the deputy who was dispatched to find out what was going on out there, and he later became a county commissioner. He's very famous here in our area, has had a local park named after him. So everybody knows about J.R. Milo Ponce, and it was actually his son who went out to the location where this happened the following day with his dad and looked over the scene of devastation. It was Joe Ponce, his son, who brought this story to our attention a few years back when he heard that we were doing a UFO conference in Edinburg. So the time frame is October and November 1966. Joe does not remember the exact date, and of course all of the paperwork that was filed with the Sheriff's Department and the Fire Department had mysteriously disappeared. And what happened is that the Sheriff's Department received what sounded like a routine call, maybe a brush fire, maybe somebody's garbage had gotten ablaze and had gotten out of control. They didn't think too much of it when the dispatcher took the call. But then he heard the part of the story where there were 8 men standing alongside the road acting crazy, waving their arms, trying to flag down passing vehicles on 490, trying to stop traffic, and they seemed very, very desperate. In fact, somebody had already called in and said that there were a few disturbed men, disturbed is the term that they used, standing alongside 490. So these men were screaming and yelling. They wanted help. They were yelling something about a strange fire that had come out of the sky and had burned everything around them. So a motorist stopped and drove to a nearby truck stop, and they called the Sheriff's Department. George Rapp, who was on duty as a dispatcher, answered, and J.R. Milo Ponce, who at that time, as I mentioned, was a deputy, was called at his residence. He was asleep in bed with his wife, but he was on call, so he was called. Joe Ponce remembers when the phone rang and it was George Rapp asking him if telling him, directing him to go out there to the location and ascertain why these men were standing by the side of the road waving crazily and screaming and yelling. So when J.R. Milo Ponce went out to that location and talked to the men, they told them about having seen bright lights and hearing loud humming noises or throbbing noises. And then there was what seemed to be a very strong storm, but it was only affecting the area where they were working, where they were digging the caliche pit there at that location, which was their job. And suddenly the strong winds came, and all of a sudden, out of this object that was hovering above them came this beam of fire, and it it started to burn everything up, all their heavy construction equipment, their earth-moving equipment, their pickup trucks, their personal pickup trucks that they had parked there because they were spending the night out there. They had a small RV where they were sleeping. Everything just went up in flames. They ran for their lives and headed out to Highway 490, which was, just a short distance away, and that's where they were flagging down all the cars. So the flames were shooting out of the sky. Everything around them was on fire, including their vehicles and their mobile home. Well, who were these men? They were a group of 8 men from the Dallas area that had been contracted by Sam Gonzalez Ranch to dig that caliche out of that pit. And these 8 men were described as being Anglo roughneck types. All the men were later debriefed at the sheriff's department, and they all told exactly the same story. They were so upset by their experience that one of these hardened roughneck type dudes actually had urinated on himself from the level of fright that he experienced that night. Joe Ponce remembers very clearly. So the men were taken to the sheriff's department where they were interviewed, and they begged the deputies to spend the night in the sheriff's office. They did not want to go back anywhere near to where they were working. So they were allowed to spend the night in the sheriff's office, and they told the sheriff's deputies that they would never in their lives return to the site where they had been working. They reportedly caught a Greyhound the next morning and left town, happy to escape with their lives. So that was the story. Now what's really, really interesting is that the gentleman who was sheriff at the time, and his name was Vickers. And what was really interesting is that recently there's been in the news the McAllen beauty queen that was killed by a priest, John Fight, and he finally was convicted. The story, which ran on 60 Minutes, included a mention of the person who was sheriff at the time that she passed away, which I believe was 1960 or early 60s, and it was John Vickers that they talked about on that 60 Minutes episode a few months back. So that's interesting. But he was sheriff for a really long time, and here he is. And this is J.R. Milo Ponce, who was Joe's dad, now deceased. What's interesting is what happened next after the incident is that some men in military uniform showed up to talk to the sheriff, and they wanted all of the documents, all of the reports that have been filed regarding the incident north of town. And when they left, there was no evidence of any kind remaining that the incident had happened. And Joe Ponce says, no more was ever said of the incident, and my father never spoke about it anymore. The only reason that Joe himself knows about it is because he went with his dad, as I mentioned, the following day and actually saw everything burned up, the remains of what had been out there. So we recently, last year, had a little gathering out where this happened north of town, and some reporters came along and some regular folks came along, and there was this really nice report that Channel 5 did, which I'm going to show you at this time. That's not the current forecast, by the way. Just to be clear. All right, so I just want to show you on Google Earth, we have all these amazing technologies now. Even before we went out there, Mary Moya, who owns the ranch now, is Mary here tonight by chance? No. But Mary Moya allowed us to go on her property and to look at where this incident happened, and she was very gracious. And as I said, we had an event out there last year. So this is 490. 281 is over this way. 4 miles from 281 is this location. Mary has this is kind of a pavilion there where she has special family events. Family and friends gather for barbecue and so forth. And then right back in here is where the incident happened. All those many years ago. Now, the men, after all, as stuff was burning up all around them, they ran over to 490 and they were flagging down the vehicles over here. This is a close-up. Joe Ponce, Joe is not in the house tonight. Joe, are you here? He was going to try to make it, but he hasn't yet. So, Joe Ponce told me that the debris was scattered all over here in this whole area. This is the pavilion that I was talking about. The man ran this way and up to 490 to seek help. Of course, all these buildings back then were not around. It was pretty desolate out there. So Joe Ponce first told me about this back in 2013, and he said, "Noe, I'm going to show you something very interesting." And he took me out to the site, and he told me the whole story while we were walking around looking at these pieces of metal from the mobile home and various things that were burned up. So he took me out there, he pointed out all the various aspects of where this happened.
And what I can remember about that night was that my dad received a phone call from the sheriff's department at around 12 midnight. And the dispatcher, who at that time was George Rapp, was telling my dad to get out here to this area because there were some people that were standing out on Highway 490, and they were asking for help, or they were acting kind of particular. And my dad came out here, and that's when he found these gentlemen out here. But he didn't come by himself. He came with another gentleman by the name of Sam Gonzalez, who was the owner of the ranch. And they were the people that were standing out here and were asking for help. Were the workers that were working in the ranch in the caliche pits, getting caliche out. They worked for a company from upstate. They were all Anglo gentlemen. And when my father described it, one of them in particular was a gentleman who had just his t-shirt on and his pants, but he had urinated all over himself. That's how scared he was.
He must have seen something really unusual.
Yeah.
And they refused to go back to the work site.
Right, yes. They, in the report, if you ever find that police report, in the report it says that Mr. Gonzalez had asked them to go back, to where they were staying at in that trailer house or those living quarters, and they refused. They refused to go back. They said they weren't going to do it because apparently they didn't have just one occasion to see whatever they had seen, but they had seen it several times.
Okay, so we're going to go on to some other cases from South Texas that are very, very interesting. But you can hear more about the Edinburg incident when we have our UFO Conference and Festival on April 13th and 14th. And we're going to go on to this amazing UFO case that involved two gentlemen from McAllen, a gentleman that I know, Javier Gonzalez, and his brother. Now, they had been in San Antonio. Javier had gone from McAllen to San Antonio to help his brother with a project he was doing, and then they were both driving back to McAllen. And they were about approximately 10 miles south of San Antonio when something very, very strange happened. This was midnight, and it was July 7th, 1968. July 7th, 1968. The two of them were traveling on Highway 281. Interstate 37 had not yet been built, which nowadays we use I-37 a lot to bypass US 281. But in 68, 281 was about your only option for getting from San Antonio down to the valley. So they had gone about 10 miles and were in the area known as Highland Oaks. Today it's known as Highland Oaks. And today there are some houses and little shops and stuff, but back then there wasn't much. When suddenly Javier and his brother noticed that there was a glowing orb or disc up on one of the hilltops alongside Highway 281. And they were watching that as they got closer to that hilltop. And then finally, when it was such an unusual sight, they decided to pull their car over. And just as they did so, that object moved off the hilltop and came within 30 feet, hovered within 30 feet of their vehicle. Now, Javier says that it was an extremely large object, extremely large. It was silvery, metallic silver. And in fact, it looked like it was made of like mercury, like silver mercury texture to it. It somehow gave him the feeling that the whole craft was somehow alive. And the mercury on its hull was kind of shifting around. So he spotted this huge craft. It came within 30 feet of the vehicle. And what was really unusual is that they noticed that several times the craft went from hovering near the vehicle, going back to the hilltop where they originally saw it, and then coming back to them. They both got out of the car and were standing there looking at it. And during one of the times that the craft was hovering near their car, Javier went and stood right under the craft and looked up at the bottom of the hull. That's when he noticed the striking metallic silver characteristics of it. And something strange happened. There was a time period of at least 30 minutes that he later realized he could not remember what happened during those 30 minutes, and neither could his brother. As far as they were aware, they got back in their car and they drove on to McAllen. And that was all that they remembered. It wasn't until many years later that these repressed memories, which we know in UFO research that a lot of times an incident like this leaves the witnesses with repressed memories, where they have been told to repress. Techniques have been used to repress their memories of what happened that night. But later in life, something can trigger those to come back, and that's exactly what happened.
Just like Travis Walton.
Yeah.
Don't get out of the vehicle.
So here's San Antonio, and following on down 281, it's hard to see this map, I apologize, but they were here in this general area when this encounter happened. It was in 1992 when Javier thought he was peacefully asleep with his wife in their apartment in North McAllen, when all of a sudden he woke up with a start, and he was not in bed. He was in his house. He was approaching his bed, but he was hovering face down about 3 or 4 feet above the carpet. of his apartment, he was surrounded by 4 little guys. He called them little creatures. He told me that the closest description is what we know of as being the Greys. So there were 4 little creatures that were around him, and yet he was hovering kind of between them, and they were generally moving him or motivating him back toward the bed. So Javier conjectures that what was going on here is that he had been with them a while, and then they were returning him to put him back into his bed, and it was terribly unexpected for these creatures when he suddenly woke up, and it seemed to greatly upset them. So a short distance away, Javier had opened his eyes. He tried to call out to his wife, who was just a short distance away, asleep in bed, but he found that he could not talk. All he could do was make grunts. He was grunting. And his grunting caused his wife to suddenly stir from her sleep and start to sit up in bed. And at that very moment, as she started to sit up, the creatures dropped him from whatever power they were using to locomote him. They dropped him. He fell face down onto the floor, which was about 3 feet below him. And he injured both his wrists in falling down. And the creatures that had been surrounding him, the 4 creatures, vanished. They were suddenly gone. He doesn't remember exactly how they vanished. He did not see them vanish, but he suddenly was aware that they were not there. His wife, by the time she was able to wake herself and figure out what was going on, she did not see anything. She just saw him lying on the floor groaning from the pain of this. So it was after this incident happened that he had this relapse of the memory of what had happened to him back in 1968. He suddenly realized he had seen these creatures before. He had seen them when they took him aboard that craft, that metallic silver craft, south of San Antonio, that after he pulled over and he and his brother went up to him, he suddenly in his mind could see being aboard the craft, interacting with the creatures, interacting with both him and his brother, and they had both, he made those mental connections finally, they had both been aboard that craft. So we were hoping to get Javier here tonight. However, he had an engagement that he could not break. He's actually a local musician, and he was contracted to play with the band tonight. So, but we're hoping to have him with us at the April 13th and 14th event. Before we look at a few more amazing stories that have happened here in South Texas in more recent years, I want to re-invite everyone, especially those who have walked in just moments ago. I want to remind you all that the Edinburg UFO Festival is now ranked the 3rd best UFO conference in the world. And Chris, do you know where Roswell, New Mexico Festival was ranked in these rankings?
I'm going to guess 5.
10. 10.
And everybody knows where Roswell is.
So Edinburg, by this well-known internet list making service called Listverse, ranked Edinburg number 3 in the top 10 festivals for UFO and alien lovers back in last year, and we're hoping to keep the momentum going. So be sure to be with us for this amazing event. As I previously mentioned, we're going to have Travis Walton, Nick Pope, John Greenwald, and Stephen Bassett as our featured speakers. We're also going to have a discussion panel, and we're going to have a lot of other activities. I want to tell you about this amazing story just from a couple of months ago, and I'm going to have my friend Chris talk a little bit about his impressions of this as well. We had a gentleman who had an amazing encounter near Laredo, and that's Chris's neck of the woods.
For some odd reason, right in and around Catarina, which is about the center of an area that goes from Laredo to Eagle Pass to Pearsall, we get dozens of reports of sightings, but unfortunately a vast majority of them are just lights up in the sky. But that area seems to be a hot spot, and Catarina is right in the middle of that area.
We've also had a lot of activity in Cotulla area.
Cotulla is also in that area.
I went back to the MUFON archives. I'm a member of the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON. Chris, I think you are too, or no? Okay. I'm the former state section director for MUFON, so I have access to their archives of all the reports that MUFON has investigated. And what's interesting is that around that same evening, January 23rd, 24th, 25th, there were other sightings in that same area, including Cotulla. Other people reported seeing very similar to what I'm about to show you in this video. But what happened here was a gentleman named Gary Trevino from Eagle Pass was working at an oil field in Catarina Ranch when he saw these strange lights appear, and you're going to see them in a minute. He pulled out his cell phone and he took pictures, and amazingly enough, within a day or so, his Facebook post with the video had over 140,000 views. It shows lights appearing in the sky at different times, moving erratically, and then disappearing. So let's watch this video. Okay, Chris, tell us a little bit about your impressions of this video. It's hard to tell with just lights in the sky, but it was very impressive to me. And while you speak to it, I'm going to rewind the video.
J. Allen Hynek referred to them as those darn lights. You see a light in the sky, you can even photograph it, but you can't really say what it is you're seeing. It's just a light. The naysayers will come out and say, oh, it's just Venus. It doesn't matter which direction you're facing. They'll say, you saw Venus, you saw the moon, you didn't know what you're looking at. But there are lights that a lot of people see. I've seen some really strange lights in the sky, and all you can do is stare at them and report them. You can't really get any idea of what is causing the lights because the object is so bright, you can't make out a shape around it.
Now, Chris, I want you to look at this and tell me, is this a single object or is it multiple? In other words, is it a single light? Oops, let me get this. Is this a single light, you think, or is it multiple lights? Single object. So you can see what I'm talking about.
The impression I get looking at it, it's a series of lights, one after another, but I don't think it's one object crossing the sky.
Because, you know, in the case of the Stephenville lights, people thought that there were multiple objects, and it turned out to be one big, huge triangle-shaped object. Some people said possibly a mile wide. And what they were seeing were the lights around the edges of it.
That would be a possibility. People have said, why do flying saucers, UFOs, need running lights? Physicists came up with the idea that perhaps what you're actually seeing is not a light, but it's the visible product of whatever kind of energy they use to propel the ship. So what we're seeing isn't a light, it's kind of like the flame from a jet. That was just one theory.
Now we have another very recent sighting from just this past December at 6:40 p.m. here in McAllen. And what's really interesting about this is you have multiple witnesses. We always look for multiple witnesses as opposed to a lone witness. We look at multiple witnesses looking at something from different vantage points, perhaps taking video or still pictures from different angles. Those are what we refer to as the sweep cases in UFO research, as opposed to just a single person, as I mentioned. So this is the direct quote of what the lady that had this experience said. "Was cooking dinner for my family, went outside to let the dog relieve himself, when I saw to be a glowing orange ball flying across the horizon. While I was trying to comprehend what I was seeing, an identical object was trailing not far behind, and then another. Quickly I realized what I was watching was not natural. Came inside, got my wife, and we both started watching more craft. My wife told me to go get the camera, which I did, really not want to for being afraid of missing this awful sight, but I went and retrieved my phone, and when I came out, more objects were coming in formation." So what we're going to do is watch this video, and this is what they saw.
Look, there's more. What the hell is that?
Pardon my French.
Look at it.
Once again, we have the question of, is that multiple objects or is that one large object? And we're seeing lights around the fringe of it.
Look at this shape, like a triangle, or look. Oh, one of them just disappeared. What the hell is that?
Don't talk like that, kids.
They're disappearing.
Especially if you're recording.
¿Dónde?
Okay, you can tell that this is right off their cell phone, and in fact this is a MUFON investigation document that I'm sharing with you, and this is a file that was submitted to MUFON by the actual eyewitnesses with no kind of editing or anything. What they saw was, as I mentioned, up to 20 bright objects, or what they thought were separate objects. It might have been one large object with lights all around. Now what's really interesting is I had a report from a friend of mine who has attended most of the Edinburg UFO conferences. His name is Rick. He's an attorney in McAllen, and he lives near the airport, and he took this picture around the same time frame, and the lights look eerily similar. Let me see if I can back up and show you you see here is a screen capture from the video we just saw. You see that formation? Now Chris, doesn't that look like it's one solid object with lights fringing around it?
Yes, it does. A lot of people have said, why is it back in the 50s we had flying saucers, and today we have flying triangles? Back in 1949 in Mississippi, about a dozen people saw a giant flying triangle pass through the sky. They reported it to the Air Force. This was before the Robertson panel had come out. The Air Force looked into it, and they had so many witnesses that all told the same thing. This was in 49. So flying triangles have been with us for a long time.
Okay, now this is the picture that Rick took over the airport. I don't know if you can see, but this is the McAllen Airport right here. And right above it was this strange formation of lights, which looks to me like what's known as a black triangle. Very interesting case was just brought to my attention today. It is from the MUFON files. Very credible witness, a Border Patrol agent. It is currently under investigation by MUFON. And what happened here was a Border Patrol agent was stationed along the river looking for a different kind of alien, Chris.
I did it for 26 and a half years.
Former Border Patrol also, one of your comrades, was stationed near Roma. Anybody been to Roma? Nice, quaint old town. Unfortunately, some of the historic buildings are falling apart there now. But anyway, he was looking over into Mexico, across the Rio Grande, while on duty with the U.S. Border Patrol, sitting right next to the river between the Mexican town Miguel Alemán and the Texas town Roma. I was looking south toward Mexico, looking for signs of illegal crossing. It was nearly dusk, and I noticed an object in the sky moving slowly over the town in Mexico. I had already been an agent with the Border Patrol for several years. I know what a helicopter looks and sounds like, aerostat balloons and drones. So I thought it might be a drone being used by smugglers. We are to report sightings of drones in our area. Responsibility is they can be a danger to our aircraft that might be around. So I grabbed my binoculars and could clearly see what it was. It was a pitch black, three-dimensional, diamond-shaped object. I know what a drone looks like, as stated, and this object had no propellers. It moved steadily upriver from my location, keeping the same pace and altitude the whole way until it was out of sight from normal drone ranges used in the area. The object didn't wobble or tilt, just moved horizontally across the sky. I tried to record it with my iPhone, but it was too far away to see clearly. It was only through my powerful binoculars that you could see the unreal shape and movement of the object. I say in the video triangle, but it was actually a diamond. I had never seen a UFO my entire life until then. So we're going to watch his iPhone video, and as he mentioned, it's not a very good image. And people always tell me, Chris, and I'm sure you get the same, we have so many phones now with video and pictures. Why aren't we seeing a lot more UFO proof? Well, it's really hard to get good images or good video from these tiny little cameras. That's just the state of the technology.
I have a zoom lens that I can clip on to my cell phone. It gives me about a 20 power zoom, which you can really reach out and see things, but you can't hold it still. The gadget was designed to be used with a tripod. So you're holding your cell phone up, trying to videotape a flying object that you can see, it's going to come out blurry. Plus, the phone can't focus on the object. Your cell phone sends out a beam. It's an infrared beam that hits the object, and that's what causes your lens to focus. Because the object is so far away, your focal elements in the phone can't catch it. That's why you're going to come up with these blurry objects.
So that brings us to the catch-22 of UFO research, which is you have to have fixed equipment with special lenses and filters in a fixed position and be ready for when the UFO shows up. The catch-22 part being that UFOs never show up in a predictable fashion. You can never predict when one is going to show up. So therefore we end up with blurry little lights on people's cell phones, and that's the best we can do right now. So here is the image taken by that Border Patrol agent who contacted us through MUFON, shared his video direct from his cell phone, unedited, and here it is.
Like, for real, UFO. Like, I'm looking at it through binoculars. You can't tell through the camera, but it's a triangle shape. Like, for real, UFO. Like, I'm looking at it through binoculars. You can't tell through the camera, but it's a triangle shape.
If you try holding your cell phone up to the binoculars, the cell phone won't focus because the binoculars will be in the direct path of the IR beam, and you'll wind up
through
with a
binoculars.
blurry
You can't tell
picture.
through the camera, but it's a
I know
triangle
it's
shape.
private.
Okay, I looped that several times because it's such a short video, but very impressive. And I looked at it, I imported it into Adobe Photoshop frame by frame, and I blew up the images, and it looks very impressive. But of course, you lose a lot of resolution because of the the source material, and it's really hard to see very much, but it was a very interesting sighting. And what we have tonight, Chris, is we have very credible witnesses. We have Border Patrol agents, we have Coast Guard, we have a Coast Guard agent, we have somebody who's obviously a trained observer, a drone pilot, and we have a number of reports that have been filed recently by very credible witnesses. So here we have in nearby town of Elsa, 4 bright lights seen by multiple witnesses at the HEB parking lot. So what happened here was this gentleman was leaving the store, this person was leaving the store, and all of a sudden, there were people, there was an employee in the parking lot pointed up at the sky. And then he looked up in the direction, took out his phone and started recording. We thought it was a satellite, but then noticed that there was nothing that was said about it in any local news. And the lights were very bright. It was cloudy outside. The clouds passed in front of it, reflected the shape of the object. It only showed 2 lights and then turned direction, and I saw 4 bright lights that were flashing. I was excited because I enjoy looking at the sky. So we're going to watch this gentleman's video directly from his phone, which he submitted to MUFON, another case that's under investigation. This was just from last year in November, happened at 9:30 a.m. at the parking lot of the HEB in Elsa. So here we go. By the way, this is a Photoshop close-up of one of the still frames from the video. It almost looks like Casper the Ghost or something there, Chris.
Yeah, it looks like what you'd call an orb during a ghost investigation.
So here's how the actual video looked.
Yeah.
We're going to run that one more time just because it's such a short video.
Yeah.
There was another interesting case that was brought to my attention that happened just a couple of years ago. And what really is impressive to me is this is a trained observer. He's a former Coast Guard, and he's also a drone pilot. He says, I stepped out of my apartment at approximately 9 p.m. and noticed a single white light near the horizon, about 30 degrees. I noticed the object was very slow moving because I could see 2 stars behind it in the background. I didn't pay a great deal of attention to the object at first because I'm quite familiar with the air traffic in the area, particularly the frequent Border Patrol helicopters and the international flight traffic. However, about 5 minutes later, after retrieving a few things from my truck, I noticed the object had moved a little closer and was easier to view. By this time, the object was at about 45 from the horizon. This time I noticed because despite appearing at high altitude, I could clearly see the light and there was no strobe whatsoever. I pulled out my phone and began recording the object. I observed that the object was moving slower than a normal aircraft. During the entire time, I kept looking for the strobe or even the silhouette of the aircraft. Not once did I see any strobe, nor could I see a silhouette of the object. So, you know, what's interesting to me is his description of this is very, very precise, don't you think, Chris?
Yes, the south-southeast direction, the 30 degrees of altitude. You can tell this guy is using his past training to give you a description of where the craft is.
So we're going to go ahead and watch the video now, and he actually narrates it for us, but I need to warn you that it's very, very difficult to see the little object because it's so far away from the camera's perspective. So I'm going to try to keep my laser pointer on it while I show it to you, and here we go.
Okay, the UFO that I'm I don't know if you can see it here. I'm trying very hard to catch. There it is. There it is. Okay. Now, originally, I had seen this thing traveling from southwest to northeast at a pretty good clip, and it looked like it was like the planet Venus. And so it traveled southwest to the northeast, but then it took a direct easterly. It turned slowly and took a eastbound. Then once it got over to maybe Westlaco or so, it took a southbound, and now it's making a circle again. And now it's coming up to where, now I'm standing right here on Hibiscus and 11 and a half right now. And this thing is actually coming full circle now, which does not make sense. If it was an aircraft, it would have, it's way too high to be an aircraft. It's not a satellite, because satellites go in straight trajectory.
Really, really hard to see that. I apologize, but what I did was I did a screen capture without any sort of editing and just zoomed in using Photoshop, and this is what I got. This is what the object looked like, and it's right in the center of that screen, even though it's a tiny little point of light.
You notice he was doing a really good job documenting where he was, the direction he was aiming. He talked clearly so you could understand him and he didn't swear. And it made for a very good recording, so you can go back later. You can watch the recording. You don't have to ask him very many questions because he covers all the grounds. That's the way you want to try to do it if you see something. So when you present it in a situation like this, you've got a very, very good reported sighting.
Chris, we're going to take a few minutes to listen to an audience member who'd like to share their experience. If you would carefully descend those steps there and take the microphone to the person, and if Nelly Del Bosque can just raise your hand, and Chris will bring you the microphone.
Nelly?
Where is Nelly? Can I have Nelly Del Bosque? Wave your hand again. Somebody? Is Nelly Del Bosque in the house? It's real hard for us to see because we've got a spotlight shining on us. Is there a Nelly in the house?
Does anybody know her?
Nelly Del Bosque? We'll go on to James de los Santos. James de los Santos, raise your hand. I know you might have a little stage fright, but believe me, you'll get over it.
The second largest fear in the entire country is death. The first biggest fear is speaking in public.
What? Nobody told me that. We don't have anybody claiming to be James de los Santos?
People fear speaking they fear speaking in public more than they fear death.
All right, what about Cesar Lopez? Cesar A. Lopez. There we go, our brave volunteer. You have 3 minutes to tell us your story. Okay. Mr. Lopez.
Me and my wife have actually been wanting to be in a place like this so that we can share something that we saw.
Stand up so everybody can get a good look at you, please.
Me and my wife have actually held something, you know, in our hearts to try to share, and this is a special occasion for that. But it's something that has been in our minds and has been not bothered us, but just, you know, set us aside from reality. My uncle, he's not here with me, but he's the type of guy, he's about 70 something years old. He's the type of guy that goes out at night around 9, sits down in this chair he has, and looks up at the airplanes, smokes a cigarette. But in one particular time, as my wife is here, she won't let me lie.
Good.
My uncle said, hey, come out here so you can see, the strange satellites moving around really quickly. And me and my wife were outside and we were looking up and we saw 3 different lights. They were traveling real fast and then they would stop and then go back very fast.
I'm sorry, where were you located at the time?
I was in 107 and Tower Road.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And they would go very fast and they would stop and then come right back.
Was this recently that this happened?
This was about maybe a year ago.
Sorry,
And-
folks, that's UFO investigator in me kicking in there. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and at first we were, it can't be a plane. A plane can't stop and go back very fast. And a satellite will, 3 satellites, almost in the same place. Well, that's not heard of either. And, but the strange thing about it was that they would come across as they were like gonna, crash. And my uncle would just say it out loud, oh yeah, the planes are gonna crash. Los aviones van a chocar. And they just got together and they formed one light. And it traveled fast. I mean, this thing was fast. It just moved and then it would stop and come back. And then later on, maybe 2-3 minutes later, it disintegrated into 2 again. And we were just like fascinated with that. It's something that, as God is my witness, that me and my wife saw something strange. Ever since that day forward, I go outside and I take a look up, but I haven't seen anything else like it, like that day.
Mr. Lopez, we really appreciate that. And by the way,
Thank you.
this is actually a common characteristic of a lot of UFO sightings where objects seemingly seem to be separate and then they come together and form a larger object, and then a lot of times they'll also separate back into individual units. I have read many cases where that is, but that was a very unusual sighting and very interesting. We appreciate Cesar bringing that to us tonight. Is Julio Valdemar here? Would you like to speak? Julio Valdemar? Nobody claiming that? Oh, here you go. Sorry. Bright light in the face here.
Hi everybody. Sorry, I had light English, so I tried to make my best. 3 years ago, coming up in the news, something happened in Mission, Texas. Like a dozen of goats, just when the people wake up, find no blood. Something like these kind of stories about the chupacabra, something like that. So when finished the report from the day series, I called the news for try to have more information about this. And I made 3 calls in different days and the report never came back. So in Spanish, this is a report from mutilación de ganado, mutilation of animals. So in the report say the sheriffs and the agriculture department say the water is clear, the food from the goats is in good conditions, so just the goats not have any good explain. Somebody wanna try to find the video in YouTube? It's on there. They serious, but she never answered me the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Animal mutilations are a fascinating study in UFO research, and we haven't had too many in the Valley. We had some in the 70s. And Texas as a whole has not had a whole great number of cattle mutilations, but there have been some. It's an interesting study, as I mentioned. We have a few more names to call on, but we're going to go back to our cases that from our that have come in online for tonight from the area for a bit. And this one is very, very interesting, and we've got video also. It's a metallic cylinder, which you see right here. This is what the original video looked like, and then I used Photoshop just to zoom it without any additional editing. The witness from Weslaco, this happened, by the way, last summer in June, 7:30 a.m. I was on my way to drop off my 7-year-old son at summer school, and I turned north, noticed an object in the sky, and told my son, as he loves to see airplanes. As we traveled toward it, we both realized it did not appear to be a plane or a helicopter, but could not determine what it could be. What I found odd was that it was not moving in any direction. As I approached the stoplight, I decided to open the car window and take a picture with my cell phone. I zoomed in as much as my phone would allow. We continued traveling north and about 1.5 miles and then turned right toward his school. Once we arrived, we got out of the car and looked back in the same direction to see if the object was still there, and noticed that a jet had left a smoke trail. I told my son, oh, that was probably what it was. As we looked toward the end of the smoke trail, we saw the object again. By this point, the receptionist at my son's school came out and wondered what we were looking at. We explained what we were looking at. She finally saw the object we were looking at, and all of a sudden it disappeared, and she said, where did it go? 5 seconds later, it reappeared, and she said, that's strange. Very strange how it disappeared and reappeared. So this is what the object looks a little bit closer up in the video I'm about to show you. And here we go. Oops. I'm sorry, that was a still picture. That was not a video. This is the still picture that one of the still pictures that he submitted to us through MUFON, and this is a close-up of the object. This is a very interesting case. And, you know, there's a lot of hoax stuff on the internet. You have to be really careful. People make up UFO sightings and they use special effects. And there's been so many people that have been exposed as hoaxes. But what I look for is the conversation going on, the ambient noise, if the camera video looks steady, if you can see surrounding landmarks. This one to me seems to be pretty genuine. This is from Brownsville, Texas, from 2 years ago. And there's a saucer-shaped object, you see it here in this screen capture, flying across the sky horizontally, captured on video by 2 witnesses in a moving car. Now you're going to hear the radio in the car playing. They got conjunto music. It's obviously from this area. You can see the, it looks like the bay or the ocean. And they were coming back to Brownsville from a fishing trip on Highway 48. They noticed a bright oval shape moving slowly from left to right, stopping and hovering. The sky was cloudless. You can see the sunset going on. The object had another small object that was trailing the big object and was absorbed, but was not. All of this was not captured in the video. So let's watch this video. I'm going to loop it again for you, excuse me. I'm going to loop it again a couple of times because it's a short video.
It's a UFO.
That looks pretty authentic, doesn't it, Chris?
Yes, that's something that, if it were hoaxed, if it had a lot more detail, the image would be a lot clearer, it would be stationary, and I don't think they'd be playing the music in the background.
I mean, if somebody wanted to do a fake video, they would do a much better job, I think is what our conclusion is here. This is obviously taken while the car is moving, the object is in the distance. Everything seems to match the description that they gave. And in fact, the MUFON investigators are also looking into this case right now. All right, now, closer to here, we had a case in McAllen last year in May. And it was Memorial Day, barely sunset, when I went out my back porch, which faces west, and again saw the bright light moving slowly in the sky. This time, when the light dimmed out, I saw the shape of a craft where the light had been. The shape of the craft was a rectangle with a smaller rectangle on top of it. The color was brownish, red, rust colored. I watched it move across the sky and go behind a small cloud. It never came out of the cloud. I waited for 50 minutes. I guess it was the size of a small plane. The observer went on to state that he had had 2 other similar sightings of a similar object in 2013. Okay, before we get to the trucker that was yanked out of his semi by a UFO, I'm going to see if we have Art Marquez who'd like to tell us about his experience. Chris is on his way down with a microphone. If you can just wave both arms. Art Marquez. Do you see him, Chris? Do you see him? Give us a quick rundown, Art, about the experience that you have had or that you know about.
Well, by hearing everybody, I thought I was the only one that had an experience with something like this. It was late 70s. I'm from Elsa. It was in 88 in Monte Cristo. A friend and I were driving an old truck heading east on Monte Cristo, and we saw a light. And we didn't think very much of it, and it was heading towards us. And before he got any closer, it went like a zig, and it was out of the way, like very fast. So I thought this light was very different. And it stayed on my mind. I'm 62 years old, and it stayed on my mind ever since. I told my kids about the story, and well, they look at me like, but that was my sighting. I kept it on with me all this time.
Thank you very much, Art. Thank you very much, Art. Now, what's interesting what Art just said, that it's this sort of incident sticks in people's minds. I have talked to hundreds of people from the valley who had something happen that they saw when they were little, and they remember it vividly as if it just happened to them. I work with a gentleman, I work in the McAllen Independent School District, and I had a gentleman that I worked with who had an experience where all the kids were playing in his neighborhood in Weslaco, and all of a sudden a huge craft appeared and was hovering over their neighborhood. And all the boys that were playing stopped what they were doing and looked up at it. And to this day, you know, he recalls, he becomes kind of nervous and uptight when he's talking about it. He recalls the feeling that he had when they were all standing looking up at that object. So yeah, this is something that a lot of people experience, and then it stays with them their whole lives. Joe Ponce, the gentleman who went with his dad to see the remains of the 1966 incident, to this day recalls vividly what he saw because it was such an eye-opener. On February 12, 2017, at midnight here in Edinburg, a gentleman was sleeping in the berth. This is directly from his testimony, so there are some misspellings. Sorry about that. He was sleeping in the berth of his semi-truck when he was awakened by an interior glow in the truck. He was lifted from the bed, uncovered and fully aware for a few seconds. And then he felt that he was made to sleep as if he had been sedated. And this is something that has happened to him in the past, and it felt like when you get put under before a surgery, he said. This is another case, we can only release part of it. It's another case that's under investigation by MUFON. But it's interesting that it happened right here in our town, in the very midst of this town. We had a very interesting black triangle UFO sighting a few years back in Mission. It happened on August 11, 2014. This is a still frame that I captured from the video that you're about to see. To me, it's very clear that this is one object and it has lights at each apex. It's a very typical black triangle UFO sighting. The witness told, in the MUFON report, the witness told us a little after 10 p.m. I went outside to test my Sony camcorder and observed a triangle-shaped object moving in a westerly direction at a good rate of speed. The sighting lasted about 3 minutes. The object was emitting a strange pulsating hum like an electrical transformer. The object headed off to the west, and I shot video for as long as it was visible. The object stayed on a steady course as it flew in a direct path to the west. I have taped unusual phenomena in the past and have submitted previous footage to MUFON. So I was a stable emotional state as I videotaped this object. My strongest emotion was curiosity. So let's watch this video from 2014 in Mission, Texas. Having a little trouble keeping that camera steady there, Chris.
I imagine seeing something like that in the sky would make you a little nervous.
And once again, in UFO research, you never have a case where the camera is steady and ready and poised for the UFO to appear. That's never the case. After the UFO appears, if you can get it on a camera stand, that would be the ideal. Or position yourself in such a way that you're steady up against a solid object. And he's trying to zoom in as far as he can. It's got some strobing thing there going on, Chris.
I was wondering if that was artifact from his camera, or if there's actually coming off of the
Yeah,
ground.
it could be, you're right. It could be from the camera.
Because you'll notice sometimes the blinking lights aren't between the triangles, and sometimes they are.
Okay, before we go on to the next case, we have Pedro Garza. Chris, can you hunt him down for us? Careful going down those stairs. Pedro Garza in the house? There, okay.
That's the way to do it, stand up so I can
Stand
see you in
up,
this dark
that's
room.
good.
Hello, sir. I'm Pedro Garza. This story happened to me about 20 years ago, fresh out of high school. Me and a friend of ours were driving to Harlingen. Back then it was, I believe, STI or something like a college in Harlingen.
CSTI, yeah.
We went down 107. We were taking the back roads, just cruising at night, about 9 o'clock. We were just pretty chill night, enjoying the night, fresh air. It was funny, we were getting into Combs past Santa Rosa, and we were kind of anxious to get to his dorm already. We were kind of tired. And we saw the entering Combs sign, and we already knew, we had been there before, so I knew how long it'd be till we got to his dorm. I was kind of restless, wanted to get out of the car. And for some reason, after we passed the Combs sign, we both blacked out. We have no recognition of getting to Highway 77, crossing Highway 77, and we both woke up at the same time, and we were in the parking lot of this dorm. Like the light, it was the light, four-way stop, and it was the entrance to his dorm. We both woke up at the same time. We looked at each other. His car was on, but it was in park. And we looked at the time, and we were missing 45 minutes of time. We knew that from where we saw the entering Combs to his dorm, it was about 10 to 15 minutes to get there. And it was about 9:45 when we were passing through Combs. And when we woke up, it was 10:35. So that was it was about 45 minutes. It took us 45 minutes apparently from where we should have taken us 15 minutes to get to where we were. And the funny thing is that we both kind of like had a deep breath, woke up, turned around, looked at each other, and had no idea where we were. Like, it kind of took us a second to figure out that we were already at his door. And we both looked at the time, and it was 10:35, which is about 45 minutes after the time that we had last seen the entering Combs sign.
I'm sorry, what year was that?
This was about 20 years ago. I'm 40 now. I was out of high school. It was about 1998, about there.
So as far as you know, your memories of what happened are still being repressed.
Yeah, and the thing is that I had never, before that time, I had never believed in UFOs. I never believed in anything. And now I'm a big believer. And I mean, I don't have any details. I don't know anything. I just know that we both blacked out at the same time, woke up at the same time, and we both knew where we were. We knew how long it was going to take us to get where we were going. And we can't account for 45 minutes of time.
Have you ever considered undergoing regressive hypnotherapy?
I have thought of that before. I've never.
There are a lot of UFO researchers who have received that training. If you go to MUFON.com, you can put in a request to have somebody contact you, and then you can just discuss it with them. We have found out a lot of very interesting repressed memories from individuals who have had an experience similar to yours. Just a suggestion, and it's a highly personal thing. Some people don't want to do it. So,
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Garza. We appreciate it. So, well, let me just, Chris, while you're out there, I called on a few names a while ago. If James de los Santos is here and wants to speak, would you stand up? Give you 1 second chance. James de los Santos? Okay, in that case, we'll go on to this next case. Now, what's really fascinating about this one is there were so many objects. Up to 50 fast-moving objects, intensely bright. My dad was working outside with his welding mask on when he noticed something moving on the sky. He noticed about 50 objects that appeared to be emitting high-intensity light. He took off the welding mask, and he had more of a hard time seeing the objects, and so he called me. At first, my dad thought it was birds, but we noticed the speed, realized birds couldn't move that fast. Also, birds don't emit light. I went outside with my camera and took high-resolution pictures of the site. The lights were the first sighted by my dad coming from the north and then started heading south. So what's really interesting is this description. These lights were not in a straight path. They appeared to be moving incredibly quickly like bacteria under a microscope. These objects performed extremely fast changes in direction. They changed direction without acting like typical planes. We were both extremely confused and somewhat uneasy. We eventually lost sight of the objects. They headed down toward Mexico. Okay, we're about at the end of our cases that we received online and from MUFON. Chris, do you have some words of wisdom as we start closing this down for the evening?
Not words of wisdom, but one of the best triangle videos that you'll ever possibly catch was the Laredo Triangle. You can see it on YouTube.
Oh, let's put it on while you continue describing.
Ishmael Coyer, a friend of mine, I knew him probably for 30 years now. When I first met him, I never said anything about flying saucers or UFOs to him because I didn't want him to think I was strange. He never said anything to me because he didn't want me to think he was strange. We met at the UFO conference in Laredo. I looked at him, he looked at me, and we're both like, Okay, cat's out of the bag. He had bought a brand new thermal camera, and he was out in the backyard looking at the stars with it. This was in October 31st, 2010. As he scans up towards the sky, just trying to take in stars, a huge triangle passes directly over his head. He was just fortunate that he'd hit the record button and was able to capture this image. It is very striking. It looks very much like the Belgian triangle that was caught back in 1960s, I believe it was. He took the film to a video expert to have it checked. They tested it using all the different filters, using all the different computer programs they had to make sure that this was an actual video. They can find absolutely no evidence that this thing was faked. If you look for it on YouTube, it will say it was in 2011, but it was actually 2010 when it was captured. The video was released in 2011. That's why it has the wrong date on YouTube. He took the image to Roswell, to the 10th largest UFO conference, and he was able to he was able to run into Stanton Friedman, and he showed him the video. Now, Stanton Friedman has been doing UFO research since the 60s. 50s? Yeah. There's not a whole lot he hasn't seen. If you want to impress this man, you'd better have something to show him. And when Ishmael Quayer showed Stanton Friedman this video, Friedman actually said, "That's impressive." And then he came to Laredo to appear at the UFO conference that we had there.
Yeah, unfortunately I don't have that with me tonight, but as Chris says, you can find it on video, YouTube.
Just type in Laredo Triangle and it will come up. And it's impressive. It is the best image of a flying triangle ever seen.
Okay, I don't have any more names as far as people who wanted to speak that I haven't called out, but is there anyone that would like to speak? Okay, Chris, you got the victim over there. Wait just a minute, and Chris will come down with the microphone. We have just a few minutes left in our program, so let's hear your story.
This is Shirley Baum from Pennsylvania and Diana Sheldon from Ohio. We are members of the WarrenLightCenter.com. I just thought I would like to share that with you. It's one of the oldest UFO conferences in the United States. Early UFO authors were speakers at the conference. People who would travel from Lilydale to Cassadaga, Florida, would stop at the Warren Light Center. It's at Polk or Franklin, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
But it's one of the oldest UFO conferences. It was the largest at one time in the United States. So there's a website that you can look at, and there's a few of us that are still getting together. But the original Warren Light Center is no longer. But it's interesting. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you very much. We stand on the shoulders of giants in the field, like Stanton Friedman and all the organizers of all the many groups, NICAP, a precursor to MUFON, many other groups over the years that kept the flame burning as far as trying to conduct research on these strange objects that people see all the time and they interact with. So, we close tonight by inviting everyone to attend the 7th Annual Edinburg UFO Festival, April 13th and 14th, ranked the 3rd best UFO conference in the world. And we have some merchandise available in the back and some books as well. We have Travis Walton's film Fire in the Sky will be shown right here at the same location in 2 weeks on a Thursday. And any last remarks, Chris?
if y'all want to help make Edinburg the first biggest UFO
Yes.
conference in the entire world, you show up and tell all your friends to show up, because the more people that come to these things, the more recognition you'll get.
We appreciate you all coming tonight, and maybe we could have the house lights on so that people could exit safely. We'll wait just a minute. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got a bright light in my face, so I couldn't see the hand. Somebody wanted to speak, and Chris is headed your way. Anybody that's on a tight time schedule needs to be beamed up right away, just exit.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I have quite a lot of stories that happened to me. I used to work in Border Patrol along the Rio Grande Valley area, the Reynosa, McAllen area. When I was posted underneath the bridge in Reynosa and Hidalgo, I was patrolling there, just a normal night. Me and my other officers were calling on the radio. And 1020's like, are you okay? Are you all right? So we were seeing weird objects. Dogs were crying, cows were moving weird. Usually cows move in magnetic field direction. Well, it's kind of strange. So our sergeant and border patrol was saying, did you see what you were seeing? I go, it's not aircraft. I go, I don't know what it is. And that was very unusual. And then from there, I retired from border patrol. I went to a correctional officer with the state of Texas in Huntsville, where there's death row and everything. And death row, you know, we do protect the offenders and everything. Well, I was outside patrolling my patrol unit around the facility. Well, when I was driving, well, we always carry a shotgun and weapons with us in case there are escapes of offenders. I was driving and I parked my vehicle and something wasn't right. It's like, what is that? So I talked to the towers. We have towers around the perimeter. And go, hey, did you see what I'm seeing? He goes, yeah, what is that? I'm like, I don't know. That was about 2 years ago. The other story I told you about was about 8 years ago. And when I was a child, 1986, May 20th, I remember, 4:30 p.m., I was outside my mom, watering the grass. And me and my mom looked at the sky and told Mom, what is that? She goes, there's a flying saucer with different directional lights flying around the air, broad daylight. That was one incident. And back in 1994, on East Lone Street and University, those large aircraft flew along the neighborhood, sound all the alarms of the vehicles, and all the neighbors got scared. Like, what the hell is that? We didn't know what it was, but it was just a swoof, like real low aircraft. All we know that U.S. Army and U.S. Air Force Air Force was chasing after it, and Edinburg PD showed up to us like, would you identify? Well, we don't know what it is, sir. And he goes, look, I'm an officer. I go, I know about law enforcement. I go, I can't explain. So the police officer was telling us, well, just stay right here. They were chasing after something. And that was back in 1993 when this incident happened.
That's a great story for ending our conference tonight. Thank you all for attending. Chris, you have some of your books for sale. You can meet folks. You can go ahead and meet folks up at the lobby, and I'll join you at a table later. If anybody wants to stay and talk to us, we'll be around for a while. And thanks again. We'll see you all.